I probably shouldn't have said it, but the words slipped out before I could stop myself. Only if you want me to be. That was the first time she looked at me without blinking, as if I'd broken some invisible wall she'd spent years holding up. It started with something simple, her kitchen sink. I'd seen her struggling with groceries on the stairwell earlier that week, a heavy paper bag tearing at the edges, cans rolling down the steps. I scooped them up before they clattered further. She thanked me politely, cool, reserved. That's how she always was, measured. But 2 nights later, I heard the sound of running water echoing through the thin apartment walls. A pipe had burst in her place. When I knocked, she answered in a loose sweater, sleeves pushed up, her hair not as carefully kept as usual. For the first time, she didn't look like the woman who passed me in the hallway with her chin slightly lifted, pretending not to notice. She looked tired, human. "Do you know anyone who can fix this?" she asked, motioning toward the kitchen. "I can take a look," I said before I could think. The truth was I wasn't a plumber. I'd patched up things before in my place. Faucets, a leaky radiator, but nothing like this. Still, the way she looked at me, half skeptical, half hopeful, made me roll up my sleeves. Her apartment smelled faintly of lavender, though the scent couldn't quite cover the sharp tang of damp wood. Water pooled across the tiled floor, catching the yellow light. I knelt down, tightened a valve, and tried to focus. But it wasn't the pipe that distracted me. It was the way she hovered behind me, arms folded, leaning against the counter. Her sweater slipped slightly off one shoulder. I caught the movement in my peripheral vision and forced myself not to look too long. "You shouldn't be doing this," she said finally. "Why not? You're too young to waste your time fixing my mistakes." I almost laughed. "It's just a pipe, not a mistake." She didn't answer. Instead, she stepped closer, passing me a towel. Her fingers brushed mine. Just a second, maybe less, but enough for me to feel it. My pulse quickened, though I kept my eyes on the wrench in my hand. The silence grew heavier than the water dripping into the metal bowl I'd set under the pipe. Every sound seemed exaggerated. The creak of the building, the low hum of her fridge. "You don't talk much," I said, trying to ease the tension. "Maybe I don't want to say the wrong thing." I looked up. She wasn't smiling. Her eyes lingered on me, unguarded in a way I hadn't seen before. "What would the wrong thing be?" I asked. She tilted her head as if testing me. "Inviting trouble." The wrench slipped in my damp hand, clattering onto the floor. For a moment, neither of us moved. I bent to pick it up, but when I straightened, she was closer than before. "That's not trouble," I said softly. Her lips parted slightly, as though she might speak. But instead she let out a slow breath. "You're dangerous," she whispered. I should have laughed it off, should have stepped back. But I didn't. Instead, I leaned against the counter, the distance between us barely an arm's length. "Only if you want me to be," I replied. Her eyes flicked down, then back up, locking on mine. She didn't move. Neither did I. The dripping pipe faded into background noise, and in that suspended moment, I knew something had shifted. The towel slipped from her hand, falling soundlessly onto the wet floor, and she still hadn't looked away. I hadn't realized I was holding my breath until she stepped back, breaking the stare. The room filled again with ordinary sounds, water dripping, the faint buzz of the fridge, but none of it felt ordinary anymore. She bent down to pick up the towel she'd dropped, movements slower than before, deliberate, as if regaining control. When she straightened, her voice carried that practiced calm she wore like armor. "You shouldn't be here this late," she said. I almost answered with something casual, something safe, but the words caught in my throat. Instead, I shrugged and turned back to the pipe, fiddling with the valve even though I'd already tightened it. "Doesn't bother me," I said. "That's not the point." Her tone was firmer this time, but I caught the edge of weariness behind it. I risked a glance over my shoulder. In the soft kitchen light, her face looked different than it did in the hallways. Not polished, not guarded, but softer. And tired in a way that made me want to ask questions I had no right asking. I thought about what I knew of her. Not much, honestly. A first name, A laugh I'd heard once through the walls when someone called her. Grocery bags carried alone always. No visitors. No ring. No casual goodnights to anyone but herself. I tightened the pipe again, though it didn't need it, just to keep from saying something foolish. She was watching me. I felt it before I turned. "You remind me of someone," she said suddenly. I looked up. "Who?" She hesitated, fingers tightening around the damp towel. "Someone I used to trust. A long time ago." The way she said it, flat, clipped, told me more than the words themselves. Whoever it was, they hadn't earned the ending she wanted. "I'm not him," I said before I could stop myself. For the briefest second, something flickered in her eyes. Not belief, not doubt, but the risk of wanting to believe. I dried my hands on the rag and pushed the bowl of water aside. "The leak's not fixed completely. You'll need a real plumber." She nodded, though she didn't move from her spot. "Thank you." The silence stretched again, heavy with all the things neither of us was saying. I tried to focus on the mess I'd made on the floor, but my eyes kept drifting. To the curve of her wrist where her sleeve had slid up, to the way her hair fell loose around her neck. Dangerous, she'd called me, but it didn't feel like I was the danger. It felt like standing too close to a flame I didn't want to step away from. Cleared my throat. "I should probably stay." The word was soft, almost lost under the hum of the fridge, but it froze me in place. She crossed her arms, as if regretting it immediately. "Just until the water slows, in case it bursts again." I nodded slowly, though we both knew the pipe wasn't about to explode. When she reached past me to set the towel on the counter, her hand brushed my arm. Light, barely there, but it sent a jolt through me stronger than any warning sign. I almost said it then, the thought I'd been biting back since I stepped into her apartment, that she made me forget the lines people weren't supposed to cross. But instead, I stood there in the dripping silence, wondering how much longer I could hold it in. I told myself to focus on the dripping pipe, on the damp towel spreading across her counter. Anything but the way her hand had just brushed mine. But once it happened, I couldn't unfeel it. Her sweater sleeve was still pushed back, her skin warm where it had grazed me. Too warm. I took a step back, feigning a stretch, as if distance might cool something that had already caught fire. "You should maybe put a bucket under it tonight," I muttered. "Just in case." She tilted her head, studying me. "You're nervous." I let out a short laugh, too sharp. "About pipes, yeah." We both knew that wasn't what she meant. Her phone buzzed on the counter, the screen lighting up with a name. She glanced at it, lips tightening, then turned it face down without answering. "Someone important?" I asked. "Not anymore." The way she said it, flat, but with that slight tremor beneath, told me more than if she'd explained. Whoever was on the other end, she didn't want them here. Didn't want them knowing she needed help tonight. I swallowed, wanting to ask, but afraid the question would make her retreat. Instead, I said, "He still calls you?" Her eyes flicked to mine, sharp, then softened. "You notice too much." "Can't help it," I admitted. The silence stretched, but it wasn't empty. It was heavy, alive. She leaned back against the counter, arms folding over her chest like a shield, though the corner of her sweater slipped again, baring her shoulder. I shouldn't have stared. I did anyway. I forced myself to look away. "I should head out. It's late." "You don't have to," she said quietly. I froze. She must have noticed because she added quickly, "Just until the plumber comes tomorrow, in case something else happens." I nodded, though we both knew she wasn't talking about pipes. I sat at her small kitchen table, pretending to check my phone, pretending not to be caught in the charged stillness between us. She busied herself with making tea, though I noticed her hands trembled just slightly as she poured the water. She set a cup in front of me. "You take sugar? I'll take it however you do." Her hand paused on the spoon. A faint smile tugged at her lips, gone before it fully formed. "Dangerous answer." The words echoed back, dangerous. That wall again, shifting closer to breaking. A sudden knock rattled the front door. Both of us startled. She stiffened, set the spoon down too quickly, the clink too loud. "You expecting someone?" I asked. No, her voice was tight, almost clipped. She didn't move. The knock came again, lighter this time. Whoever it was, they weren't leaving yet. I stood halfway, but she caught my wrist before I could. Don't, she whispered. Her grip was firm, almost desperate. Our eyes locked, and for a moment, the knocking faded into nothing. Her hand lingered around my wrist longer than it should have. I knew I should pull away. I didn't, and for the first time I wasn't sure either of us wanted me to. The knocking finally stopped, but the silence it left behind pressed harder than the sound itself. She still had her hand around my wrist. I felt the faint pulse beneath her skin, quick and uneven, and it took everything in me not to close my hand over hers. Slowly, she let go, as though she'd realized what she'd done. She turned toward the sink, but her voice betrayed her calm. You should go, she said. Do you want me to? She gripped the counter. That's not the same question. I stood there, heart pounding in my chest, trying to read the angle of her shoulders, the tilt of her head. She wouldn't look at me, and maybe that was her answer. But then, she exhaled, a shaky breath that cracked her composure. I don't let people in anymore, she said quietly. Not into this apartment, not into my life. It's easier that way. I swallowed. Then why me? She finally turned. Her eyes locked on mine, unblinking, raw in a way I hadn't seen before. Because you don't know the worst parts yet. The words landed heavy. A warning. A shield. But it felt like an invitation, too. I took a step closer. Then tell me. She shook her head, a bitter laugh escaping. You're too young to carry my mistakes. I almost laughed too, but it came out softer, almost tender. You think I haven't made any of my own? For a beat, neither of us spoke. Just the faint drip of the pipe. Just her eyes, searching mine like she wanted to find something there she'd lost a long time ago. Then, as if gravity had shifted, she closed the space between us. Not all the way, just close enough that I could see the tremor in her lips, the rise and fall of her breath. You should be careful with me, she whispered. I swallowed hard. Maybe I don't want careful. The silence after that wasn't empty, it was thick, electric. My hand twitched at my side, aching to reach for her, but I kept it clenched. If I touched her now, there'd be no pulling back. The kettle clicked behind her, startling us both. She stepped back quickly, retreating into the small safety of movement, pouring water she didn't really need to pour. You're dangerous, she murmured again, almost to herself this time. I leaned against the counter, watching her carefully, my voice lower than before. You keep saying that, but you haven't told me to stop. Her hand paused mid-pour. Water spilled over the edge of the cup, hissing against the counter, but she didn't move. The sound filled the kitchen, then faded into silence. Finally, she looked up at me, eyes steady, unguarded. What if I don't want you to? Her words hung in the air. What if I don't want you to? And I swear the ground shifted under me. I opened my mouth, ready to say something I'd regret, when the faint buzz of her phone cut through the silence again. Same name flashing across the screen. She froze. This time she didn't turn it over. She let it ring, eyes locked on mine. When it finally stopped, I asked the question that had been clawing at me since the first time I saw her push that call away. Who is he? Her lips parted, but no sound came out. For a second, I thought she'd ignore it again. Instead, she placed the phone gently on the counter, as though setting down something fragile. My husband, she said. The word hit harder than I expected. You're separated? She cut in quickly, her voice sharper now. For over a year. Paperwork's a mess. He doesn't know how to let go. I stared at her, the room tilting. I should have stepped back. Instead, I stepped closer. Why didn't you tell me? Her eyes flickered, guilt flashing across her face. Because it makes this worse. I leaned against the counter, trying to steady myself. The air felt thick, every breath deliberate. You think I care about paperwork? I asked softly. You should, she shot back, though it sounded more like a plea than a warning. You should care that I'm older, that I'm still untangling a life I never thought would end. You should care that this is messy. Her voice cracked on that last word. Messy. I moved closer, close enough to see the glint of moisture in her eyes before she blinked it away. Messy doesn't scare me, I said. For a heartbeat, she looked at me like she wanted to believe it. But then something in her shifted, a defense snapping back into place. You're too young to know what you're saying, she whispered. I should have let her win that argument. Instead, I laughed under my breath, shaking my head. Funny. You're the first person who's ever said that to me and actually made me want to prove them wrong. Her hand trembled as she reached for the mug she'd poured earlier. She gripped it tightly, as if anchoring herself. Then, almost without thinking, she said, You don't understand. He still has a key. The words dropped between us like a match on dry leaves. I stiffened. What? She nodded, eyes darting to the door, then back to me. If he ever walked in and saw us. Her voice faltered, but the implication was clear. Suddenly the earlier knocking didn't feel like a coincidence. I crossed the kitchen in 2 steps, lowering my voice but keeping my eyes locked on hers. Then tell me right now, I said. Do you want me to leave before this gets harder? I stopped, my chest tight, the words catching on the edge of everything we hadn't said yet. Or do you want me to stay? Her silence stretched between us, longer than the pipes had dripped, longer than any hesitation we'd shared so far. My chest felt tight, like if she didn't answer soon, I might break it open myself just to let the air back in. Finally, she set the mug down with a sharp clink. Her hands were trembling. You shouldn't stay, she said. The words cut sharper than I expected, but the way her voice cracked softened the blow. Then why can't you say you want me gone? I asked. Her eyes snapped to mine. For the first time, she didn't look away. Because I don't. It was barely more than a whisper, but it hit me harder than if she'd shouted. I closed the distance slowly, giving her every chance to stop me. She didn't. Her breath caught when I was close enough to feel the heat radiating off her skin, close enough to see the tension pulling at her lips. This is wrong, she said, though her hands curled into the counter like she was holding herself back from reaching for me. Maybe, I admitted, but it feels like the first thing that's been right in a long time. She let out a laugh, broken, shaky, like the sound of someone realizing they'd lost the fight against themselves. You don't know what you're doing, she whispered. I leaned in, just enough for my words to brush the space between us. Then teach me. The silence between us burned hotter than any touch. She was the one who closed it, her hand trembling as it rose, fingers brushing the side of my face, light as breath. The contact was so slight it almost hurt. For a moment we stayed there, her palm warm against my cheek, her eyes wet and unblinking. God help me, she murmured, and then her lips found mine. It wasn't smooth. It wasn't perfect. It was desperate, raw, half stifled by the fear of being caught, half fueled by the years of holding back. My hand slid to her waist, and she didn't pull away. If anything, she pressed closer, like she'd been waiting for this moment as long as I had. When she finally broke the kiss, her forehead leaned against mine. We were both breathing hard, as if we'd run miles without moving an inch. This doesn't solve anything, she whispered. No, I agreed. But it means something. She searched my face like she was trying to decide whether to believe me. Then, with a trembling exhale, she nodded once, small, almost imperceptible, but real. I reached for her hand. This time, she didn't pull back. For the first time that night, there was no more hiding, no more pretending the line hadn't already been crossed. We stood there in her kitchen, water dripping, tea cooling, everything around us a mess. But in that moment it didn't matter, because we'd made the choice. Together, the kiss had changed everything, but it hadn't erased the world outside her apartment. When we finally pulled apart, the air between us was different. Not lighter, not heavier, just undeniable. She stepped back first, leaning against the counter like she needed something solid to hold her up. I stayed close enough that the warmth between us lingered. This isn't simple, she said, her voice quieter now. I don't want simple, I replied. Her eyes softened, but they still carried that flicker of fear. I've spent years cleaning up mistakes, living with the regret of staying too long, leaving too late, pretending to be fine when I wasn't. I can't, she trailed off, biting her lip. I can't afford another mistake. I reached for her hand. She let me take it this time, fingers lacing with mine. Then don't call it that. Don't call it anything yet. Just let it be what it is. Her hand tightened in mine, and the tears she'd been holding back finally broke free, slipping down her cheek. I brushed them away with my thumb. You make it sound easy, she whispered. I smiled faintly. Maybe it's supposed to be. The pipes still dripped into the bowl. Forgotten. The tea had gone cold, but neither of us moved. She let out a shaky laugh, shaking her head. You're too young to know what you're asking for. Maybe. Or maybe I just know I don't want to keep standing outside your door, wishing I had the courage to knock. Her breath hitched, and for a long moment, she said nothing. Then slowly she nodded. Stay, she said. Not a whisper this time. A decision. And just like that, the balance shifted. Not forbidden, not dangerous, not impossible. Just ours. The hours that followed blurred into something quiet, steady, almost ordinary. We talked, really talked, about her marriage, about how lonely it had been even before it ended. About the way I'd been drifting, waiting for something to feel real. By the time dawn crept through the blinds, the fear was still there, but it no longer controlled her. Or me. I left her apartment with the promise of returning. Not tomorrow, not rushed, but soon. On her terms, with her choice. Because that night wasn't about fixing pipes or stolen moments. It was about two people, different ages, different mistakes, different scars, finding a place where they didn't have to pretend anymore. Looking back now, I realize it wasn't danger that drew us together. It was recognition. She saw me when no one else did. And maybe, just maybe, I helped her see herself again, too. And sometimes that's enough to change everything.